Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Live with ESL Services. My name is Donna Pierce, and I'm one of the ESL Program Development Coordinators at Brock University in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. In these sessions, we'll talk about topics that are of interest to English language learners and also to international students and other newcomers to Canada, because we'll cover information about both language and culture. This week's topic will involve vocabulary. It's safe to say that 100% of my past students have expressed concerns about how to increase their vocabulary in order to improve their scores on standardized tests such as IELTS, and also to make their communication clearer, both in their academic work and in their daily interactions with native English speakers. There are definitely numerous strategies you can use to help increase your vocabulary, but in the next two sessions, we'll focus on increasing your vocabulary through affixation. That is, using suffixes and prefixes to create additional words from the words you already know. Before we begin, let's review the four main content words of English. First, we have nouns. A noun is a person, place, thing, or idea. Next, we have verbs that represent the action in English sentences. Then, as we discussed last week, we have adjectives, which modify or describe nouns and make our speech more colorful and precise. Finally, we have adverbs, which modify or describe verbs in much the same way that adjectives describe nouns. It's important to understand these parts of speech because when we add affixes to words, sometimes it changes the word to a different category. For example, if we add the suffix er to the verb teach, we get the noun teacher. This week, we'll begin our discussion of affixes with prefixes. Prefixes are small, meaningful segments of language that attach at the beginning of words. In fact, we can see this in the word prefix itself, because pre means before or front. Usually, prefixes are just 2, 3, or 4 letters, and they don't change the category or part of speech of the base word. Instead, they add an additional layer of meaning to the base word. For example, when we add the prefix re, which means to do again, to the verb write, we get the new verb rewrite, which means to write again. Prefixes help add complexity to the English language and make it possible to create new words that are understood by speakers everywhere. Understanding the meaning of the various prefixes can help you decode words appropriately and increase your vocabulary, because you'll now know 2 words where you used to just know 1. By far, the most common category of prefixes in English are negators, prefixes that add the meaning not, against, or opposite to the base word's meaning. The most common English negative prefix is un, so if you're unsure about which prefix to use, choosing un is probably a good bet. From this, we can get the words untrue, meaning not true, or unkind, meaning not kind. Next, we have a group of 4 prefixes, in, im, ear, and ill. These are all actually variants of the same negative prefix. The choice of which one to use depends on the sound that follows it. So im is used for words that start with p, b, or m. From this, we can get the words impossible or immobile. Ir is used for words only that start with R. So from this, we can get irrelevant or irreversible. Ill is used strictly for words that start with L, giving us the words illegal and illogical. And in is used for most other sounds, other than the ones I just mentioned. Next, we have a pair of negative prefixes which mostly attach to verbs. So first we have the prefix dis, from which we can get disagree or disconnect. Then we have the prefix mis, which gives the meaning wrongly. So we can say mispronounce, pronounce wrongly, or misunderstand, understand wrongly. Sometimes we can use the prefix non, giving us the words non-fiction or non-existent. Other times, we can use the prefix D, which again attaches mainly to verbs. So we can get the verb deactivate, I didn't pay my bill, so my account was deactivated, or de-ice. In Canada, in winter, we have to de-ice our windows before driving. Another negative prefix that specifically means without is a. So we can hear the word amoral, meaning without morals. The politician appeared to be completely amoral. Or anonymous, without name. The donation came from an anonymous donor. Lastly, we have two common negative prefixes that mean against. First, we have the prefix anti, so we can take antibiotics if we have an infection, or when we're disappointed in the movie, we can say the ending was anticlimactic. Then we have the prefix contra, so we can get the words contradict or contraception. Not all prefixes in English are negators, however. Some give us information about time, such as pre, which I mentioned before, which means before, and post, which means after. These two prefixes are especially important when reading research studies because you'll often see researchers talk about the pre-test, the test that is done before the treatment, and the post-test, the test that is done after the treatment to determine the effect. Sometimes prefixes give information about place. For example, we have the prefix mid, which means middle, so we can hear about a midlife crisis or talk about the dreaded midterm exam. Then we have the prefix intra, which means between, so we can talk about international borders or interact with our friends. Then we have the prefix n, which means into, giving us the words encase and envelope. Next, we have the prefix x, which means out or former. So we can talk about exhaling, which is breathing out, or mention someone's ex-husband, the husband to whom they were formerly married, but they are not married anymore. Finally, we have the prefix extra, which means outside. Students will be familiar with hearing about extracurricular activities, activities that happen outside of the normal curriculum, or we can describe someone as extroverted, meaning they are very friendly and outgoing. Other prefixes provide information about number. Many of these are originally derived from Latin. For example, we have the prefix mono, which means one, so we can describe someone as monolingual, meaning they only speak one language, or we can use the word monogamous. Then we have the prefixes bi and di, which mean two. So we can say people are bilingual, speaking two languages, or we can talk about a dichotomy. Finally, we have the prefixes poly, multi, and pluri, which mean many. So we can eat some multi-grain bread and take some multivitamins to keep us healthy. Our last group of prefixes gives information about manner or how something is done or described. So first we have the prefixes hetero, which means different, and homo, which means the same, and gives us the words heterosexual and homosexual. Then we have the prefixes hyper, which means too much, and hypo, which means too little. And we can say someone is hyperactive or suffers from hypothyroidism. Then we have the prefixes mega, meaning big, and micro, meaning little. I'm sure everyone is familiar with the term megabyte when we talk about computer memory or a microphone that we use to speak into. Then we have the prefix auto, which means self. I'm sure we've all experienced problems when texting due to autocorrect, or we can ask our favorite celebrity for his autograph. Then we have the prefix circum, which means around. So we can say that Magellan was the first person to circumnavigate the globe, meaning sail all the way around the Earth. We can also circumvent problems by going around an issue. Then we have the prefixes co, com, and con, which means together. So we can cooperate with our co-workers on a project and then commiserate about the problems we've experienced. Next, we have the prefix re, which, as I mentioned before, means to do again. So we can rewrite our essay and then resubmit it to our professor for feedback. Next, we have the prefix semi, which means partial. So we can read in the news about a semi-automatic weapon, or we can buy a semi-detached house, which is a house that's detached only on one side. Next, we have the prefix sub, which means below. So we can go for a ride on a submarine in the ocean, or we can talk about someone's subpar performance, which is performance that is below expectation. Lastly, we have the prefix trans, which means across. So we can take a drive on the Trans-Canada Highway, which is the highway that goes all the way across Canada, or we can transform our house by redecorating. So there you have it. By practicing and using these prefixes, you can now have a vocabulary that's twice as large as it was before. Next week, I'll be on vacation, but join me on August 13th when we'll continue talking about how to increase your vocabulary through affixation, specifically by using suffixes, meaningful segments of language that attach at the end of the base word. That's all for now. Bye-bye.